Welcome to the activity number 5, transdisciplinary activity number 5. Thanks Pablo Suarez for coming and Janos Suarez for coming. Pablo is working for the Red Crescent Climate Center, and he's one of our two guests, together with Joel Chalabi, that is going to present tonight one of his pieces. So thank you very much for coming, Pablo.
Thank you, Ricardo, very much for, first of all, making this event happen with such little time. As we heard from yesterday's early session, when you create an event like this, you're creating a sequence of very small disasters, right? The chances are that some room won't be available, someone didn't sign the form, the food isn't here, the projector doesn't have the adapter, The fact that you took that risk, we are all very grateful. So
brave. I love how you can link everything to a disaster.
That's my professional life. I'm thinking, what can go wrong? What will go wrong? Something will. We know Murphy was an optimist.
When we travel, I try to always have the connecting flight, within a few minutes. We can run. Pablo's like, no, we got to go one flight ahead in case.
That's Argentinian style.
Risk versus.
Well, that's another one like this here.
Yeah, well, if you're flying from Boston to Bangladesh and you miss the connection, then you don't arrive in time for the presentation. I am a little bit risk averse. But in any case, thanks for showing up. I would have wanted to go to the other session as well. So I'm really grateful for your choice. This activity will be an activity in which you have to act. You have to not act like in performance theater, but make decisions, actions that have consequences. We're going to get you in the shoes of a Red Cross worker. Long story short, I'm a researcher on climate and disasters. I was investigating how things about the climate become suffering for human beings and how we can link science with decisions. And there's a lot we know, and people still suffer. And so I started working with the humanitarian sector, and we moved towards games as a way to help people understand what we know. So we're going to play a game called Paying for Preparedness. It's about disaster risks in a changing climate. I'm sure you've heard a lot about how the mess we're causing in the atmosphere is increasing the chances of certain nasty things like melting of the poles or hurricanes, droughts, floods, etc. Now, as we move into this session, which will be roughly 90 minutes, the game that we'll play was funded partially by a sequence of organizations, including World Bank, Rockefeller Foundation, and the Climate and Development Knowledge Network. So we give full credit to those guys. But I have to give you a warning. It's going to be participatory, so you will be confused. It's part of the design of the activity that you will say, what?
So we cover ourselves.
Right? What am I supposed to do? That's a question you will likely encounter as we go through this. Let me push the buttons. We're going first. I wish I could bring in my colleagues from the Red Cross all over the world, but I can't. So I'm going to bring their voices. In 2005, we had a workshop in the Netherlands with colleagues from, I think, about 18 countries, including some I didn't know existed, like Tuvalu. And I just stuffed a camera in front of them and asked them to share a story of something weird that happened in their country. And this is a condensed version, about 5 minutes or so. So let's see if the audio works.
Something's changing. We haven't had malaria for over 100 years. That was unheard of in Jamaica. And for some reason, people are giving all kinds of excuses, but it re-emerged. There it was again.
And we've experienced a lot of mosquitoes in my country. We've had cases of dengue fever, more so now than ever before.
There wasn't the malaria. You cannot get malaria in the highland, but this year, because of climate change, so mosquito can go to the highland and then you can get malaria in the highland of Madagascar.
Something's changing.
In 2006 we had a heat wave with unusual temperatures in summer, and 1,500 people, elderly people, dying from that heat wave. This never happened before, and we have to learn from that experience.
The people told us that it's more hot, and they need to drink more water.
When you bring it back together, it all relates back to issues in terms of temperature increases, sea level rises, and issues surrounding climate change. The reefs are being damaged because of coral bleaching, the beaches are being eroded away.
The sea used to be over there. Today the sea is right here. I don't know if next year the sea is going to be over there.
Climate change is in Tuvalu, and we are experiencing it firsthand. Water is everywhere, coming from the ground and from the ocean.
In Jakarta, there's flooding year after year, and just this year in February, there's super flooding, and it killed dozens of people. And it is because climate change brought more extreme weather, more intense rainfall.
Different or about climate change that I observed is last year it hit the area that never happened a hurricane there, and people there totally did not prepare at all to hurricane.
We had 5 cyclones in 2005, all within 4 weeks.
2 years ago, was a hurricane came through to the opposite side of the island where we had never ever had hurricanes before. We were totally unprepared, did not know what to do about it.
Every year Madagascar has cyclone periods, but especially for this year we had more cyclones.
The biggest problem of climate change in my country, Mozambique, is season is changing. The people don't know, the community people don't know when they go to come the farm to plant. The consequence of this is hungry, very, very hungry. We have more job, Red Cross, we have more job for change these scenarios.
In Kenya, we've been having droughts that have been increasing in frequency. This has now brought about the intractable problem of small arms. Various pastoralist communities, in trying to gain advantage to utilize grazing resources, have resorted to actually acquisition of arms from across the borders. This has now led to ethnic conflicts and clashes that has been very difficult to resolve. Climate change is with us. We've been responding to droughts by trucking water to communities, but we found that we have to find long-term solutions.
We would want the farmers to think around why it is happening, linking into climate change, and what are the adaptation actions that they can take to improve their food production despite the drought episode.
No, we will really have to consider how we can step up our resources and our support when it comes to reduce the risks of climate change.
We have to change our planning, we have to change everything.
So, as you heard, there's patterns across the planet. Malaria used to not be here, now it is. We hear that in a small island in the Pacific, in Madagascar, and in Caribbean nations. Same story with hurricanes. We used to see hurricanes coming from there, now it came from here. We, Red Cross, were not prepared. What that means is that people don't heed the warning, so they don't evacuate, and so people die when they could have saved their lives. The Red Cross doesn't have prepositioned relief items like food, water, shelter, radios, power generation, and so on. If you listen to the issues of flooding in urban settings, that's very disturbing because the urban setting doesn't have the traditional history of solidarity from generations of sharing the same land. People just showed up a decade or two ago. Those shanty towns don't know how to cope with shocks. The Red Cross doesn't know how to cope with shocks in a shanty town. And yet we see the flood coming because it's about to rain upstream. The science is very clear. When something really huge is likely to happen, we can tell. We can tell with satellite images, we can tell with computer models, and so on. So what can we do about it? There are science can tell us things about the future. Tornadoes, just further southwest of here in Kansas, Oklahoma, and so on. We can monitor atmospheric conditions, and if they look dangerous, the place where it's likely to strike, here's a and people know they have to go down to the basement. Shut the lid, lock it, and if the tornado comes, it may take away the entire house, but people stay alive. 7 minutes is enough to save a family. And I think it was 3 or 4 years ago was the first year in the US where there were no casualties because of tornadoes, in part because of early warnings. Now, if you hear that sound, you need to know what to do about it, and you need to have a place to be safe. You need to have some water under the lid and so on. Hurricanes are one of our best success stories. Satellite shows something weird here, then it's more organized, then it's bigger, and even more organized, then it's going like this. Well, all these guys should be prepared, because the slapping could go to all of them, or maybe a very intense slapping to her. We see with 6 hours anticipation, we almost always get it right. With 24-hour anticipation, we get it right within 100 kilometers. With 3 or 4 days, we get it right within 300 or 400 kilometers. We can do stuff. You may have heard about El Niño, an unusual warming of the waters in the Pacific Ocean. This leads to strange stuff. It evaporates, it rains like hell in Peru. So more flooding. But also it changes winds and temperatures in different parts of the world. So for northern Australia, you're more likely to have drought. Where I did my doctoral research in Zimbabwe, the rains shift north, so more chances of drought in Zimbabwe, more chances of flood in Tanzania. These things we see coming with 3 months anticipation. It's not certain, but it's much more likely that something nasty may happen. And then there's the issue of climate change. A gradual trend of more hectic patterns, plus the fairly reliable sea level rise, melting of the oceans, and so on. Every single one of the stories you heard from my Red Cross colleagues, we saw coming, but we were unprepared. So my job is to help bring science to the humanitarian sector, and we do that at the community level. This is a photo that Jano took in Mozambique, in the Limpopo Valley. 700 people died in this river valley because of an unusual storm. Chief Fabio Otonga, an agronomist from the university, the head of a school district in southern Mozambique, yours truly, and the farmers talking about what we know. And all these things are relevant to these guys. Because if they know that the long-term climate patterns are changing, they can switch from maize that does well within a certain range of rainfall to planting some rice in case it rains too much, and some sorghum or cassava if it doesn't rain enough. Of course, tropical cyclones, we can do a lot, and with El Niño they can adjust what they do based on what's more or less likely to happen. Now, when I used to go either to the village level or to a Red Cross training or to a meeting of ministers to convey these things, and we can do better if we anticipate. When I was talking, people were sometimes listening, sometimes falling asleep, but I could not convey this stuff. There's trade-offs between short-term and long-term. If you spend the money now, you don't have it for tomorrow. Trade-offs between collaboration and competition. It's very good for us to work together, but if money that was going to come to me comes to us, then you get the credit. Next year I don't get the money. The Red Cross has to close a branch in the Limpopo River basin. So how do you think about these things? Incentives and disincentives, thresholds. Maybe, this much water is some trouble, this much water is some trouble, this much water is some trouble. But once you get above a certain level, you have to change the entire piano, not just the legs. And every system has these subtle non-linearities, we call them, where something changes and then flop, tipping point, catastrophic stuff. Side effects, trade-offs between the local and the national and the global, all sorts of things that I could not convey, we could not convey in a linear way. Me talking, other listening, this was not part of the picture. One very concrete example, this is from West Africa. There was a seasonal forecast issued in May 2008 that said that for June to August 2008, meaning the coming 3 months, if you define an extreme as the highest 15% of the historical record of precipitation, then in these places with green pixels, the risk of extreme precipitation is enhanced from 15% to between 40 and 50% chance. This is what comes out of the scientist. It arrives by fax to the head of disaster management coordination for West and Central Africa of the Red Cross team, Youssef Aitchelouche. He's in charge of 28 countries in this part of the world. He was dealing with military coup in Mauritania. Trouble, Red Cross has to help. Chad, dealing with the Darfur refugees. Tents, politics, all sorts of mess. Extreme rains in Congo, Brazzaville. He had to deal with all of those, plus the usual food insecurity in the Sahel and so on. And he gets this. What would you do if you're a disaster management coordinator and you get this? Right? He looks at it. He looks at it again, puts it aside, and keeps doing what he has to do, which is too much, and he doesn't have the resources or the people to do it. Now, let me put this in words. Given what we know as of May 15, 2008, we can say that in the areas of West Africa highlighted in the map, there's an enhanced probability of extreme precipitation for the period June to August 2008. In other words, the probability of seeing precipitation that would rank in the top 15% of the historical record is now enhanced to between 40 and 50%. What do you do? Well, thank goodness we had a university student, Aram, who was working with us, picked up these facts and said, holy smokes, and helped Youssef understand a little bit more what it went. They jointly did a few things. For example, strengthen the dialogue between the Red Cross and the people who make the forecast. What do you mean extreme? When? How much do you know? Should I invest my resources that were going to feed the hungry who are hungry today into preventing 1,000 people going hungry in 4 weeks? Or not? Strengthen the disaster response teams. If you are a Red Cross disaster manager in Ghana and there's a disaster in the neighboring country, Burkina Faso, and you have to go, you can wear the cape of Superman. The person at the border will not let you go unless you have a visa. Right? So if you show up and say, hi, I'm Superman coming to save lives, they'll say, show me your visa. The visa takes 3 days. And, I mean, for any Argentinian coming to Canada, it takes more than 3 days sometimes. Right? So can you go back to the first, please? Just follow up. So we got visas, we got health insurance, we trained, refreshment training on how to not only understand the forecast, but also how to mobilize people. If you have a lot of volunteers saying, how can I help, how can I help? It's trouble. You need to know what to do. Dealing with logistics, administration, bank accounts. It was the first time ever that we launched what we call an emergency appeal, which is basically the Red Cross saying, hey, we're in trouble, we need money, can you give us so much? Which usually is used for people are dead and or dying, can you give us the money to reduce death and suffering? This was the first time that we asked for money through this mechanism because of a forecast of likely travel in 3 months. And with that we did some good stuff. 7 countries, entire countries, Benin, Togo, Burkina Faso, there wasn't a national flood contingency plan. So we set up those things in motion. Community level early warning systems and all sorts of stuff. Key elements of the success story, well, first of all, there was the forecast. Then there was someone who knew what it meant, who knew how to talk to a Red Cross person. And the rains did materialize roughly as predicted. These are the 3 locations where we pre-positioned relief items. Tents, blankets, cholera kits, all sorts of things that would have taken more than 2 weeks to come from Dubai. They took less than 2 days because of the pre-positioning. So this makes sense, but only if you act based on a forecast that says it's more likely. It's not certain, it's more likely. So, we're going to play a game. You're all holding your beans, right? So first, a few ground rules. In this game, the game is not reality. It's a simplified representation of reality. It's actually a caricature of reality. Some things are amplified, and some things are not taken into account, so that we can play it in less than 1 hour. Otherwise, we would be in trouble. your decisions are going to be individual. What you do is what you want to do. Other people can make suggestions, but you're responsible for your actions. Okay? You can consult. You can do as they say, but only because you choose so. You will win or lose beans, mostly lose. You are starting with 10. You cannot share beans because, for example, you're going to be the head of health. You have a budget, you have staff, you're responsible for the health department of the southern Ethiopia branch of the Red Cross. And you're in charge of water and sanitation. You have a budget, you have assets, you have people, and you're not going to say, oh, sure, you need a bean here, have it, because you can only if he runs out of bean and people are about to die. In that case, the boss says you can share. Otherwise, no sharing of beans. Okay? We cannot let the water and sanitation person just extinguish the water and sanitation program because of her generosity, which will make him look like a not incompetent person, which he was, by losing too many beans. Okay? We need to keep yourselves accountable. The game ends either when an entire team runs out of beans, and we're going to split you in 2 teams, 2 or maybe 3, or when we run out of time. We're going to simulate 12 months, 1 year, or we call it off in less than 1 hour. So, first of all, there's going to be winners and losers. The losers are all those who run out of beans. If you don't have beans, you're still alive. If you have to pay beans and you don't have any, you're out. Okay? So if I or Jano or maybe Isabel, I will recruit you for... you can stay there for now. But, so the 3 of us are going to be bean collectors. So if someone comes to you and says, pay me your bean, and you don't have enough, you're out. And you have to sit down. You're fired, and people are suffering because they cannot receive your benefits as a Red Cross worker. You're a Red Cross person, that's your budget. Okay? Now, the winning team is the team that collectively ends up with the most beans. And that team will bean a prize. Do we have a prize to show them? They will see it later.
Well, we're going to have to show it later, because I'm afraid it won't be that exciting. You're going to have to share. We're living under conditions of scarcity here.
And then there's going to be also a winning individual, which is the person who ends up with the most beans.
Who gets the same prize.
Who gets the same prize. Now, winning, say, if it's, 100 grams of chocolate, and you win it, that's awesome. If it's 100 chocolate divided by a team of 10, it's 10 times less awesome, right? So that's going to be your first trade-off. If he runs out of beans, and he needs beans because otherwise the game is over and the team is out. Right? When I show up, he says, I don't have, he's out, he's in trouble. So you guys have to figure out who will help him get enough beans. And of course, if you help and she doesn't, she's going to be more likely to win the individual prize. Right? Next one. So, first of all, we're going to be playing a game on disasters. This is not a die. This is what in science we call the probability distribution function of precipitation. Okay? So we're going to toss it, and this is a 3. The range is between 1 and 6. A 1 is too little rain. We call this a drought. People have crop failure. People are in trouble. There's no water to drink. So the health person, the water person, the food security person, all these people get activated. A 6 is the opposite. Too much rain. Flood. Same kinds of problems. Maybe instead of cholera, it's some other disease, but it's trouble. This is trouble. Everything else is no disaster. Okay? Good news. It rained. Okay. So the chances, of course, of a drought, 1 in 6. Chances of a flood, 1 in 6. Yes?
Does that reflect the current climate reality?
Remember ground rules?
No, sorry.
So this is a simplified representation of reality, which says basically, depending on the country, if you're in Canada, it's not 1 in 6 chance of drought. If you're in Ethiopia, it's 1 in 1, because every year we have hungry people, depending on where you are. So this is an averaged developing country profile. Now, each one of you has magically become a Red Cross worker. Okay? Now, there are a few things you can do. If I push that. So, you know what this is?
Bad luck.
I, thank goodness, don't believe in that. And I've been doing this for a while, so for now I have some evidence. So this is protection against too much rain. This is what it represents. So if you as a Red Cross worker want to protect against the threat of too much rain, before the rains, before we roll the die, you have to walk in the direction of the umbrella. Okay? So if you're standing here and a 6 comes, you're protected because you're in the umbrella area. If you want to protect against a 1, you go to the opposite. I was going to place a bucket and I forgot. But imagine there's a there we go. Thank you. So this is the opposite of flood protection. Here you're protected against too little rain. If you're standing here and there's a 1, you're safe. If you're standing in the center, it means you're neither protecting against that nor protecting against that. Now, if you have very, very long legs, you could try to protect against both, but chances are you won't. Which is like the Red Cross. We don't have enough to protect against both at the same time. Now, protection has a cost. If you want to come and protect against too much rain, you have to pay 1 bean before the rainy season. And that bean is gone. Okay? If you moved your tents to a village in the floodplain, and then the flood doesn't materialize, you paid for the fuel, you paid for the salary of the driver, you pay with your trust. Your donor is going to say, why are you burning fuel while wasting my resources? Okay? So if you want to protect against any of the two, before the rains you pay 1 bean. So Jano and I or one of us will collect that bean from you. Now, these are the rules. These are the ones that really matter. If there's no disaster after the roll of the die, or if there's a disaster but you're protected, you're standing here and there's, where is it? A drought. No problem. Okay? Very clear. If there's a drought or a flood and you're not protected, you're in trouble. You have to pay 4. Because if you act before the disaster, the roads are passable, you have the time, things are cheaper if you plan ahead. It costs 4 after the trouble. Now, if you're here and there's a drought, what happens? You pay 4. You're protected against flood. You're using your resources for the wrong thing.
You had to pay 1 to get over there, and then you have to pay also.
Exactly. Okay? It sucks. It does suck. So if I'm Red Cross and I invest in tents because I anticipate that people will be homeless because their homes are flooded, and then there's crop failure because of a drought, I cannot turn that tent into food. I have to buy food and deliver it at a time when it's more expensive food, because if there's crop failure everywhere, I cannot buy it locally. I have to import it from Australia or Canada or Europe or Argentina.
So when you think about how the dice is going to roll in that probability, you're just like the disaster manager in Dakar that Pablo was talking about, Youssef, who sees this prediction that comes out of Columbia University and says 15% probability, now it's down to 40 to 50% of the historical record. What does it mean? That's what you have to figure out. What does it mean?
And the last rule is that if you don't have enough beans to pay, you're out. You sit down. You physically are out because you're fired, because there's nothing for you to do because you don't have any resources left.
But now you're in a situation that if you stand in the middle, the first time you may lose 4 beans.
Yes.
And then the next time you're out. I mean, if the same thing happens again, then you're out. So you don't. You're only able to survive for 1 year.
Well, you have 10 beans.
Well, we have 10. Yes, I'm sorry.
So 2 years. But yeah, your logic is exactly right.
2 years.
Right?
The next round.
2 rounds actually. We're going. Yeah, 2 rounds. And of course, if we had an infinite budget, if we have, where is it? I left it somewhere here. If we have the bag of beans, then we wouldn't care. We'll be giving out beans to everyone for protection against everything. But we don't have the infinite resources. Okay, so if you click the next one, there you go. Let's play.